Seeing your thoughts without becoming them. Buddhist wisdom. There is a place inside the mind where a thought stops being a thought and becomes the room we are standing in. Most of us live much of our lives in such rooms without knowing we have entered them. Nothing has to happen for this to begin. No phone call, no bad news, just a thought about an unanswered message, something someone said last week, a task left unfinished. Within minutes, the day has changed. Not because the thought was loud, but because it was believed before it was seen. A thought like this rarely appears as just a thought. It appears with the force of evidence. By the time we notice it, we are no longer simply hearing the sentence, "I should have done better." We are looking at the day from inside it. The pain is not that such thoughts appear. The pain is that we often meet them too late, after they have already become the place we are speaking from. Often, the sentence in the mind is not even the first event. Before it, there is already a tone in the body, a tightening in the chest, a leaning toward or away. The thought gives that movement a name. We then take the name as the cause, and forget that something earlier was already underway. We are arguing with a translation, while the original text continues to operate beneath us, untouched. The Buddha never pretended that real events do not hurt. Loss, illness, injustice, separation, aging, and death are not imagined problems. He placed them at the center of his first teaching. But within that seeing, he noticed something most of us miss. There is the pain of the event itself. Then there is the suffering that continues after the event has passed. The Sala Sutta gives a direct image for this. The untrained person, the Buddha says, feels two feelings, a bodily one and a mental one. In ordinary life, this is the difference between pain and the story built around pain. The first dart is the painful feeling. The second dart is what the mind adds: resistance, narrative, the question of why this is happening to me. The trained mind still knows pain. It does not add the same second wound. Most of us do not notice where the first pain ends and the second wound begins. That second wound is sustained by what the mind does with the event. A feeling appears, a meaning forms, something is grasped, and a version of me is built around it. This is why seeing matters in this teaching. Seeing does not mean staring at a thought until it disappears. It means catching the movement by which experience becomes identity. To see a thought without becoming it is to know it at 3 layers at once: as a thought appearing, as a feeling being interpreted, and as a self being built around that interpretation. When these are confused, we become the thought. When they are seen apart, the thought may still be there, but it no longer has the same authority. The Buddha's teaching gives us a way to understand this process, not as a theory about thoughts alone, but as part of a larger movement: contact, feeling, craving, clinging, becoming. The thought we hear is usually late in the sequence. By the time it arrives, much has already happened that we did not see. An ordinary day contains many versions of me: the tired one in the morning, the overlooked one in a meeting, the unworthy one when someone else is praised, the one who needs recognition when we post something online. They link together before we notice them. Much of what we call psychological suffering lives inside that linking, not inside the events themselves. So the question becomes, what does it mean to become a thought? And how is it possible, in a life with real bills and real people and real pressures, not to? Why does the same kind of event pass through us unnoticed at one moment and at another moment swallow us whole? Someone criticizes you. The words are brief, But the mind does not stop at the words. It builds a person around them. The one who has failed, the one who is being judged, the one who must now defend themselves. That person walks into lunch. That person sits in the afternoon meeting. That person is still there at dinner with someone they love, hours later, when the conversation has nothing to do with what was said at work. The same words on a different day might have passed through. The difference is not only in the event, and not only in the sentence that appears in the mind. It is in the conditions around it. The feeling tone in the body, the interpretation, the clinging, and the self that forms around the clinging. Same words, different soil. Modern psychology has come close to this in its own language. Acceptance and commitment therapy calls it cognitive fusion. The moment a thought is no longer held as a thought, but taken as what it says. Diffusion helps loosen that grip, and many have been helped by it. The Dhamma asks a more unsettling question. When the thought is believed, who is being born around it? This is close to the movement described in the Mulapariyaya Sutta. The Buddha shows the unliberated mind not merely knowing an object, but conceiving around it. The discourse repeats a pattern in which an untrained mind can conceive earth as mine and delight in it. The object changes, but the movement is the same. Experience is taken into ownership. The Pali word for this is manyati. A thought can be taken as mine. A feeling can be taken as mine. Even the body can be taken as mine. Each becomes material for the making of me. Because this construction happens faster than awareness, by the time we are conscious of I am thinking this, the I has already been built. This is the quiet power of seeing. It does not argue with the thought. It does not need to replace it immediately. It makes the construction visible while it is happening. The moment I am being judged is recognized as a formation rather than a fact. Becoming has already lost some of its force. The thought may remain, the feeling may remain, but the mind is no longer completely inside the identity they were building. Becoming a thought is not the same as having strong emotions. A person can feel intense anger without becoming it. They sense the anger arising, do what needs to be done, and the anger passes. Another person can show no visible emotion at all, and yet be lost in becoming. They spend the whole afternoon living as a failed person, never noticing that this is just a version being held in place. Not becoming does not mean coldness. It does not mean numbness with a spiritual label. It is the capacity to let feeling arise and pass without an entire identity being built around it to carry it through the rest of the day. This is where the teaching can be misunderstood. Seeing no fixed self does not erase responsibility. If anything, it makes responsibility more possible. When we no longer have to defend an image of being the one who was right, we become more able, not less, to acknowledge a mistake, to repair what was broken, to apologize without it costing us our whole sense of self. Letting go of a constructed me is not letting go of responsibility. It is what allows real responsibility to begin. If the heart of the issue is this inner sequence ending in a constructed self, then is watching your thoughts, the advice we hear everywhere, actually the answer. Why do some people meditate for years, practicing watching their thoughts every day, and yet their lives keep moving along the same old grooves? Often the person is not seeing the thought. They are sitting beside it while still believing its terms. The watching is real. The view inside the watching has not changed. Watching a thought is not the same as understanding it. A person can watch anger for 20 minutes and still feed the view that I was wronged. The content is being observed. The structure of clinging around it is not. So the problem is not observation itself. The problem is observation without discernment. There are levels here. Watching notices the thought. Wise attention notices how the mind is relating to the thought. Seeing notices whether a self is being made out of it. Without the last two, attention can sit beside an experience for an hour and never disturb the assumption that the experience belongs to me. The Sabbasava Sutta makes this distinction sharply. The Buddha states it plainly. When a monk attends inappropriately, unarisen effluents arise and arisen effluents increase. In ordinary language, the way we look at a thought can either loosen it or strengthen it. The Pali term for the right kind of attention is yoniso manasikara, attention that goes to the source. The same anxiety can be met as bodily feeling, or it can be used as evidence that the future is unsafe. One way weakens the story, the other feeds it. This is why meditation can sometimes feel confusing. A person may be doing exactly what they were told to do: sit, notice, return. And still, the anxiety remains. The missing piece is not sincerity. It is discernment. Attention was present, but wisdom had not entered the way attention was being used. When Buddhist practice is reduced to just watch, something important is lost. The Vitakka Santhana Sutta is the clearest correction here. In that discourse, the Buddha gives several methods for working with unwholesome thought, replacing it with a wholesome one, looking carefully at where it leads, withdrawing attention from it, tracing it back to its source, and applying firm effort when nothing else works. The first method is compared to a carpenter using a small peg to knock out a large one. The image is plain, and the wider point is simple. The Buddha did not give one method for every state of mind. Passive observation is one response, not the whole training. But clear seeing is different. Clear seeing is what reveals which response is needed. Sometimes it shows that a thought should be left alone. Sometimes it shows that it should be replaced, restrained, or examined. Without seeing, even the right method becomes mechanical. With seeing, the response fits the condition. So what does this look like when anger, worry, planning, or joy is actually present? Begin with the hardest situation. When anger has already burst out, what good does it do to say, "Stop and observe"? At that point, observation is usually not the first medicine. When anger has already taken hold of the body and is close to becoming speech, the first task is not insight, it is restraint. For most of us, when anger has taken hold, our capacity to see is severely limited. Attention narrows. Speech becomes harder to restrain. Telling someone in that state to watch their thoughts is like telling someone struggling in deep water to study their swimming form. In Buddhism, restraint is not repression. It prevents anger from becoming speech and action, and therefore from becoming karma one must later inherit. When anger is active, restraint protects the next minute until the mind can see again. If you can leave the room, leave. If you cannot, delay the next sentence. Lower your voice, slow your hands. Do not decide. Do not send the message. Do not make a final judgment about another person while anger is deciding what counts as evidence. Many regrets begin with speech or action taken before that point has passed. Later, when things have settled, you can return and look more carefully. For most of us, this is when seeing becomes possible. And what is being seen is not merely anger is here. That is only the first layer. Seeing asks more precisely, what did the anger promise to protect? What image of me felt threatened? What did the mind decide was unbearable? When these are seen, anger is no longer just a force pushing outward. It becomes a process that can be understood. When life feels closed, the mind often treats one present feeling as a prediction about the whole future. The danger is that the mind mistakes intensity for truth. What helps is to separate the layers. Inside that closed feeling state, there are usually two different things, and most of us mistake them for one. The first is the bodily and emotional weight, a heaviness in the chest, tiredness in the limbs, reluctance to move. This has already arisen. It asks to be borne with patience. The second is the conclusion the mind draws. I will never get out of this. There is something wrong with me. This is being built right now, on top of the bodily feeling. We take the heavy feeling as proof that the conclusion is true. The heavy feeling proves only that a feeling is here. It does not have the authority to describe your whole life. The conclusion built on top of it does not have to be believed. When the two layers are seen apart, the problem is no longer one solid thing. This is the work of seeing in a difficult state. It gives each layer its proper name. Feeling is feeling. Conclusion is conclusion. Self-image is self-image. When they are unnamed, they become one mass. When they are seen separately, suffering loses some of its solidity. Then there is planning, working through real problems, solving things that need to be solved. Here, there is nothing to dispel. Thought is doing what thought is for. What helps is awareness of scope, knowing what you are thinking about, why, and at what point it is enough. There is a signal that thought has crossed from problem-solving into worry-feeding. It begins to repeat the same content without producing anything new. When you notice this, the round has done its work. Time to set it down. Here, seeing knows when thought is serving understanding and when it has begun serving anxiety. What about positive thoughts? The Dhamma does not require suspicion toward every form of happiness. Joy after wholesome action is not the problem. The question is, what happens next? Does joy remain joy? Or does it become a self that must be seen, praised, and protected? I did it can be a simple acknowledgement. It can also become a self-image that must be maintained. Same words, two different inner movements. A way to tell them apart. In the minutes that follow, is there a sense of contraction? A need to be recognized? A defensiveness against anyone who might doubt? If so, identification has set in, and the joy has been turned into an identity to protect. If not, the joy was simply a joy. Seeing protects joy from becoming possession. It allows joy to be known without turning it into a person who must be admired or repeated. The better question, in any of these states, is not how to get rid of a feeling, but what has been taken as me inside it. When a strong state arises, instead of asking, what should I do with this feeling? Ask, what is being taken as me right here? The question is not meant to solve the feeling. It is meant to reveal the owner that is formed around it. Once seen, that owner begins to lose its hold. Why is it that those who have practiced rightly for a long time do not look positive in the modern sense, and yet there is a steadiness around them you can sense by sitting nearby? What they have is a way of seeing trained over time. It rests on a foundation without which nothing else fully holds. The Buddha did not treat insight as something floating above ordinary life. The discourses on the three trainings gather the path under heightened virtue, heightened mind, and heightened discernment. In ordinary language, how one lives, how the mind is gathered, and how experience is understood. These three are not separate ladders. They support one another. How one lives is not abstract morality. It has nothing to do with looking good in front of others. It is a way of acting and speaking that leaves few regrets behind. Few moments of fearing you will be found out. Few inner contradictions to manage. Small lies, small harms, and small betrayals of one's own sense of right keep stirring the mind. Such a mind cannot easily settle. The issue is not divine judgment. It is the fact that the mind lives with the traces of its own actions. This is the practical reason this layer comes first. Concentration is enough collectedness for seeing to function. It is not an altered state, and it is not a performance of peace. For those of us living busy lives, raising children, working long hours, caring for parents who are aging, a regular pause each day, even 10 or 15 minutes, can be a beginning. The Buddha never gave us a 15-minute rule. Practice needs repetition. Without repetition, insight rarely becomes available when life presses on us. This is why seeing is not a minor technique inside the path. It is the way wisdom touches experience directly. Virtue makes the mind less divided. Collectedness makes the mind less scattered. Seeing shows experience without ownership added to it. Together, they allow a thought to arise without immediately becoming a self. Without virtue and some collectedness, observation techniques tend to become decoration. They can produce a few minutes of calm after listening to a podcast like this one. They rarely change anything fundamental. The Dhamma is not a mood produced by listening. It is training repeated until seeing becomes available under pressure. What changes, for those who walk this path patiently, is less dramatic than people expect. They do not need to display spiritual experiences, and progress itself is not turned into an identity. The change is this: the degree to which they identify with each passing content of mind grows smaller. The same old thoughts still come. I am not enough. They don't understand me. The future is uncertain. The thoughts have not vanished. What has changed is that these thoughts no longer take over. At first, the thought becomes a world. Later, it is noticed as a movement. Sometimes it ends before the mind has built a world around it. This is not suppression. Suppression is one part of the self trying to silence another, and that battle is itself another form of becoming. The seeing of the Dhamma is different. It is the gradual recognition that there was never a fixed me who owned the thought to begin with. The struggle loses its basis. This does not remove responsibility for speech and action. It removes the need to defend a self-image around them. Most of us learn to treat thoughts as self before we ever learn to question them. A thought appears, and almost at once, there is someone inside it. We have been doing this since childhood. It feels like simply being a person. The strangeness is not that we identify with thoughts. The strangeness is that this identification has been so continuous, we have never had a chance to compare it to anything else. The path the Buddha pointed to is a slow turning against that direction. Not so there will be no more thoughts. Not so we become empty or detached, or somehow less alive. So that thoughts can arise and pass as they do, without anyone being carried away by them. The old formula in the Anattalakkhana Sutta is plain. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. Not because experience disappears, but because ownership is no longer added to it. The awakened one still thinks. The difference is that thought no longer has to become I, me, or mine. Practice begins at the moment that taking is noticed.